Who were the Limburg brothers?
The three Limburg brothers were the most famous manuscript illuminators in Flanders, and worked near the end of the 14th century and the early 15th century. Paul, Herman, and Jean were originally trained as goldsmiths in Paris and went on to become the official court painters to the Duke of Berry around 1404. Arguably their most important work was the Trace Riches Huers, a book of hours made especially for the Duke. The book included calendar pages, which listed saints' feast days, zodiac signs, and astrological information. The Limburg brothers completed fantastically realistic, full-page paintings for each month of the year. The paintings are full of life and vivacity, for example, the deep blues and powdery whites of the February page evoke the chill of winter. The brothers used very fine brushes, and most likely magnified lenses. In order to achieve such a high level of detail, the work of the Limburg brothers is a good example of the international Gothic style.
How does the religion of Islam influence art?
Like early Byzantine art, Islamic art is influenced by iconoclastic views. This means that it is forbidden to depict idols, or images of God in human form. In Islam it is also haram, forbidden, to depict the Prophet Muhammad in art. And this is often extended to include the image of any human figure and animals. Much Islamic art, therefore, is characterized by mathematically complex abstraction featuring organic, geometric, and vegetal decorative patterns known as arabesques. There are some exceptions to this, the Islamic art of Mughal India, as well as Persian art, are both known for lively narrative paintings featuring characters from stories and legends. Still, one will not find any representation of God or Muhammad in Islamic art.
How did Jan van Eyck achieve such incredible detail in his work?
The work of Jan van Eyck is known for its incredible detail and realism. Like other artists of Northern Europe, Van Eyck used oil paints. Oil paints take a long time to dry, allowing artists time to work slowly and blend colors. Northern artists like Van Eyck built up layers of oil paint by applying many thin glazes. Compared to the egg-based tempera paints used in Italy, oil paints can achieve much richer hues. Paint brushes made for painting detail were important. Some brushes were so thin that they were made of a single hair. Jan van Eyck is thought to be one of the first Renaissance artists to extensively use optic technology, such as convex mirrors and lenses, to help achieve a high level of detail in his work.
What are the rock churches of Lalibela?
Lalibela was a medieval city in Ethiopia ruled by the Zagwe dynasty, which held power from 1137 until the end of the 13th century. The city was also an important Christian center and a popular pilgrimage route. And church-building projects were possibly conceived of as the construction of a new Jerusalem in the Ethiopian mountains. At the behest of King Lalibela, Ethiopian Christians carved 11 churches out of red, volcanic rock, some of which are freestanding, while others are semi-detached and carved into rock walls. The churches are tall, narrow, and rectangular with a combination of arabesque and cruciform windows. These unique structures have been declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site and remain an important site for Ethiopian Christians.
Who was Winslow Homer?
Winslow Homer, 1836 to 1910, was an American painter who worked as a magazine illustrator and war correspondent during the Civil War. He is known for his depictions of leisure activities and outdoor scenes. And like Thomas Eakins was a proponent of realism. Though his work is characterized by its nostalgia for the simplicity of the pre-industrial era. His painting, Snap the Whip, 1872, monumentalizes a traditional children's game and includes a depiction of a one-room schoolhouse and boys dressed in simple, country clothes with no shoes on. The scene is in stark contrast to the pain of the Civil War and the changes brought on during its aftermath and during the Industrial Revolution.
What is digital art?
Digital art is art made by using digital technologies, such as a computer. Digital art is now more commonly referred to as new media art and can include two-dimensional images, whether printed or not, made with software programs such as Adobe Photoshop, for example. Three-dimensional works, or even multimedia works such as animations or videos made using computer software.
Who was Exekias?
Greek vases from the classical period feature some of the most impressive paintings in the ancient world. And Exekias is considered to be one of the greatest vase painters of the time. Living in Athens during the 6th century BCE, Exekias painted in what is known as the black figure style, which places black figures on a red background. His work is noted for its grace and sense of order. One of his most famous pieces depicts Achilles and Ajax playing draughts. From c. 530 BCE. The scene takes place during a break in fighting during the Trojan War when the mythological warriors pause to play a game of ancient checkers. The scene is very symmetrical and the arrangement of figures takes into account the swelling form of the vase itself. Exekias not only painted the vase, but he was also the potter. A signature on the piece reads, Exekias painted me and made me.
What is a caryatid?
A caryatid is a sculptural female figure utilized as columnar support in classical architecture. The Roman architect and writer, Vitruvius, noted that caryatids were named for Spartan women from a town called Caryae who betrayed their people during the Persian Wars, and were punished by being forced to bear the weight of heavy architectural entablatures. The Erechtheion, 421 to 405 BCE, is a building on the Acropolis in Athens famous for what is known as the Porch of the Maidens. This porch features 6 caryatids, which face south in the direction of the Parthenon. Like Chrysiosboi, each caryatid is in the contrapposto pose, with one leg bearing the weight of the Erechtheion's Ionic entablature, and the other leg free and slightly bent. The folds in their robes mirror the vertical design of fluting found on columns and provide a sense of stability in the otherwise fluid and graceful poses of the caryatids.
What is iconography?
Iconography is the study of visual subject matter. Many works of art depict the same, or similar, subject matter. For example, the Virgin Mary appears frequently in Western European art. A figure such as the Virgin Mary is associated with specific objects. Manner of dress, or body positions known as attributes, as well as signs and symbols. An understanding of repeated signs, symbols, and attributes helps in understanding the meaning of art.
Who is Yinkashoni Bear, MBE?
Yinka Shonibare, 1962, is a British Nigerian artist whose work takes many forms, including video, photography, installation, and performance. Some of his most well-known work questions racial identity and relationships between cultures in a post-colonial world. His sculptural work, Scramble for Africa, 2003, depicts headless European leaders dressed in European-style clothes made with African-printed fabrics as they divide up the resources of the continent amongst themselves. He was made a member of the British Empire, MBE, by Britain's Queen Elizabeth II in 2005.
Where can I find art resources online?
There are so many websites about art that looking up art online can turn into information overload. Here are a select few websites with a wealth of information on art, presented in a straightforward and often entertaining way. Heilbronn Timeline of Art History at the Metropolitan Museum of New York. http://www.metmuseum.org/toah. This incredibly detailed site combines detailed explanations of art movements and styles with explanations of specific works of art held in the museum's collection. It is a great resource for Western and non-Western art alike. If you can't make it to New York, looking at the Met Museum's timeline of art history is the next best thing. Google Art Project, http://www.googleartproject.com. A visit to Google Art Project is like stepping into a virtual museum. Roam the halls of the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, or the Tate Britain in London. Dozens of museums opened their doors to Google in 2011, allowing cameras to film their interiors in a manner similar to Google Street View. After broadening the project's scope in 2012, tens of thousands of works of art from around the world can be seen online through the Google Art Project. Smart History presented by the Khan Academy, http://smarthistory.khanacademy.org/. Smart History is a great place to learn more about art movements and specific works of art. The site provides written essays, and video and audio guides to some of the most famous paintings, sculptures, and works of architecture around the world. Recently, Smart History has made an effort to include non-Western art. Smart History multimedia presentations are engaging and highly informative.
What were Ashoka's pillars?
Ashoka was considered one of the greatest emperors of the Iron Age Maurya Empire. Located in the eastern portion of modern-day India, Ashoka converted to Buddhism, formalized a legal code according to Buddhist principles, and spread Buddhist teachings across his land by inscribing monolithic stones with his code. These stone pillars reached as high as 40 feet tall and are said to symbolize the axis mundi, or the axis of the world. The pillars mark the coming together of heaven and earth, as well as pilgrimage sites associated with the Buddha. The tops of the pillars were elaborately carved and often depict back-to-back open-mouthed lions, which proclaim Buddha's message for all who will listen.
Who were some of the major portrait painters of the 18th century?
Rosalba Carriera, 1675 to 1757. A leading portrait painter in Venice known for her early miniatures and use of pastels. During a trip to Paris she made a pastel portrait of King Louis XV. She was accepted to the Academy of St. Luke in Rome, as well as the French Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture. François Boucher, 1703 to 1770, French Rococo painter whose fashionable paintings of mythological and amorous scenes exhibited graceful style and shimmering colors. He was known for his stylish portraits of wealthy clients, including Madame de Pompadour, the mistress of King Louis XV. Joshua Reynolds, 1723–1792, English painter who studied in Rome and is known for his neoclassical style and monumental, full-size portraits that effectively capture the essence of the sitter. Extremely well regarded, Reynolds was sophisticated in his approach to art theory. Thomas Gainsborough, 1727–1788, highly honored, English portrait painter who also painted landscapes. A rival of Reynolds, his work is infused with elegance and elements of nature. His work is sometimes considered to exhibit romantic tendencies. His delicate brushwork is evident in his portrait of Mrs. Richard Brinsley Sheridan. 1785, Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun, 1755–1842, perhaps the most important female painter in the 18th century. She painted many portraits of Marie Antoinette and the French royal family while working in the Palace of Versailles. Her work strongly reflects the Rococo aesthetic. John Singleton Copley, 1738–1815, a resident of the colonial city of Boston and of Irish descent. He painted portraits of famous early Americans, including Paul Revere and Samuel Adams. Though in 1774 he expatriated to England at the behest of Joshua Reynolds and fellow expatriate artist Benjamin West. Gilbert Stuart, 1755–1828, leading American portrait painter, still famous for his portrait of George Washington. He also completed portraits of other significant American leaders such as Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe. His style greatly influenced other American painters of the day.
Who was Guan Daos Hung?
Guan Daosheng was a renowned female calligrapher, painter, and poet working during the Yuan dynasty. She was famous for her paintings of bamboo plants. Bamboo was an important symbol in Chinese art because the plant's branches and leaves are reminiscent of calligraphy. And because bamboo is flexible under pressure, it will bend, but not break. Guan Daoshen's hand scroll, 10,000 bamboo poles in cloudy mist, is the earliest surviving example of work done by a woman in China. In this painting, delicate bamboo leaves are lush and meticulously depicted, while the firm shoots are thought to represent faithfulness and fidelity.
How can El Greco's paintings appear so modern?
To some, the paintings of El Greco appear more closely related to 19th-century Impressionism or 20th-century Expressionism than the 16th-century Spanish styles of nearly 500 years earlier. His work is characterized by loose brush strokes, often ghostly, elongated figures, and a use of colors in line with the Mannerists. El Greco's real name was Domnikos Theotokopoulos, and El Greco means the Greek in Spanish. Born in Crete in 1541, he worked in Italy before arriving in Toledo, Spain. With the unfulfilled goal of becoming an artist in the court of Philip II. Although the king didn't favor El Greco, he did find many other patrons. His 1586 painting The Burial of Count Orgaz, depicts the soul of the dead count as it rises to heaven. Accompanied by an angel, and surrounded by an audience of saints, holy figures, and well-known individuals from Toledo. The figures are pale, ghostly, and white, which contrasts with the bright yellows worn by the clergy and the red fabrics worn by the Virgin Mary in heaven. The painting is arguably similar in style to Italian Mannerists such as Pontormo. And El Greco is considered by some to be a Mannerist painter.
Who was Raphael?
Raphael, 1438 to 1520. Was 31 years younger than Leonardo da Vinci and 8 years younger than Michelangelo. Very aware of their status and their skill, Raphael made his own place in this pantheon of high Renaissance artists. Whereas Michelangelo was moody and difficult to work with, Raphael was friendly, personable, and well organized. His paintings are characterized by a sweetness and harmony that has been frequently imitated, but rarely, if ever, equaled. Raphael studied in Perugia and had a successful career first in Florence, and then later in Rome, where he was commissioned by Pope Julius II to decorate the Vatican apartments. His most famous works include his Vatican fresco, The School of Athens, 1510 to 1511, and his paintings of the Virgin and Child such as Madonna of the Meadow, which also includes an image of the infant Saint John the Baptist. He painted one major mythological scene, Galatea, in 1512, as well as an influential portrait of Pope Julius II the same year. After the death of Bramante, he was called on as the architect of St. Peter's, though most of his designs were either never constructed, or were changed. Raphael died at age 37 and was buried in the Pantheon in Rome. Why was St.
What is Chan Buddhism?
Chan Buddhism, known in Japan as Zen Buddhism, is a school of Mahayana Buddhism that developed in China in the 6th century and gained importance during the Song dynasties. Chan Buddhist philosophy emphasizes the direct experience of the individual and enlightenment through meditation. While some Chan Buddhists believe enlightenment through meditation takes a lifetime to achieve, others believe enlightenment can be achieved suddenly, in a flash of understanding. Chan Buddhism had a large impact on Chinese painting. The 13th century painter Liang Kai's simple, yet expressive, hanging scroll. 6th Chan patriarch chopping bamboo, depicts a crouching patriarch who suddenly achieves enlightenment after hearing the sound of his blade striking bamboo wood.
What is the Doric order?
The Doric order was the earliest order to develop and did so towards the end of the 7th century B.C.E. It features a baseless column that supports a horizontal entablature. A Doric column is approximately 5 times as tall as it is wide. A ratio of 5:1. The shaft of the column is fluted, which means it is decorated in shallow, vertical grooves. A Doric entablature rests atop the column, and features a decorative band called a frieze, which is decorated with alternating triglyphs and metopes. The Parthenon is an example of a building constructed according to the Doric order. The Parthenon, built of marble, is dedicated to Athena, the patron goddess of the city of Athens. It sits atop the Acropolis, a prominent hill in the center of the city, which also includes other architecturally significant structures. Built under the direction of the famous statesman Pericles in the 4th century BCE. The Parthenon was designed to represent Athens' self-proclaimed status as an enlightened and civilized center of the world, and celebrated the democratic Greeks' recent defeat of the Persian Empire. The exterior of the Parthenon was masterfully decorated with architectural sculpture on all sides, and a 40-foot, gold-covered sculpture of Athena was erected on a pedestal in the center of the temple.
What is the difference between Hiberno-Saxon art and Anglo-Saxon art?
The term Hiberno-Saxon art refers to non-Christian, pagan, art produced after the fall of the Roman Empire by the Irish, known as Hibernians, and the Anglo-Saxon peoples of southern England. While Anglo-Saxon art also refers to early medieval art of the British Isles, it is more closely associated with Christian themes and subject matter. Both of these terms are used by art historians when referring to art produced from around 600 to 1066. The date of the Norman conquest of Britain.
What is knock sculpture?
Some of Africa's earliest art has been found in modern-day Nigeria and was created by the Neolithic Nok people of that region. Many archaeological fragments from approximately 500 to 200 BCE have been found accidentally during tin mining work, including fragments of human and animal sculpture. The discovered sculptures can vary greatly in size. Some are quite small while others are nearly life-size. Made from terracotta, these simple yet expressive pieces often have large heads and stylized facial features. They are usually hollow and have open orifices, such as in the nose and mouth. Some figures are standing, kneeling, or seated. Their exact function is unknown, but it is thought that the artists may have been women.
What is a mosque?
A mosque is a Muslim place of public worship, known in Arabic as a masjid. One of the most prominent features of a mosque are its minarets, or calling towers, in which a crier known as a muezzin announces the time for prayer, which occurs 5 times per day as commanded in the second pillar of Islam. Inside a mosque, the Qibla is the wall of the building that faces the city of Mecca, the most important city in Islam. The mihrab is a centrally placed, decorative niche which identifies the Qibla to the worshippers. Other common architectural features of mosques include the minbar, or pulpit, and a fountain for ritual washing, which is done before prayer. Mosque architecture often features grand domes and pointed arches, however. As the religion of Islam is practiced throughout the world, mosque architecture varies greatly depending on culture and geography.
What is art history?
Art history is the academic study of visual art. Scholars of art history, often professors, writers, and museum or gallery professionals, are interested in the historical significance of art objects, as well as the meaning of both specific works and the art produced by a particular culture or artist. Art history is traditionally presented as a survey, which is Western in focus and explains art history in a narrative form, with a beginning, middle, and end. Canonical art history texts such as E. H. Gombrich's The Story of Art and Janssen's History of Art carry on this long-standing tradition. While still greatly valued, this narrative presentation of art history is coming under increasing scholarly scrutiny. Some colleges and universities no longer teach art history, and now offer programs in visual studies or visual culture with the goal of offering insights into the visual arts less constrained by the limitations of the Western-focused survey.
Why did Louis XIV build the Palace of Versailles?
From 1638 to 1715, King Louis XIV the Sun King reigned over France with absolute power. During his rule, France was the most powerful country in Europe. In the 1660s, Louis XIV made a radical decision to renovate Louis XIII's country hunting lodge and transform it into France's new royal palace, Versailles. This change meant that the aristocrats, diplomats, and all servants would leave the Louvre in Paris and move to the relatively isolated country location. Architects Louis Leval and Charles Lebrun oversaw the redesign of Versailles, and the finished building was a massive, nearly city-sized structure with enough space for over 20,000 people, including 14,000 servants. The scale was unprecedented. The Palace of Versailles is an enormous, formidable structure with a severe, classical exterior, manicured gardens, and opulent interiors. Besides any political motivations Louis XIV may have had for relocating the palace, Versailles also served to glorify this powerful king. As the Sun King, Louis XIV emphasized his divine right to rule and his unquestionable power. The king's bedroom was at the center of the palace. He performed elaborate morning and evening rituals that represented the rising and the setting of the sun. The Great Hall of Mirrors, also in the center of the palace, is 240 feet long with 47-foot-high ceilings. The hall gets its name from the hundreds of mirrors and glass panels that inundate the room with sunlight. The vaulted ceiling in the Hall of Mirrors, inspired by Carracci's work at the Farnese Palace, were painted by Charles Le Brun and feature images of classical gods and the military successes of the king. The gardens surrounding the palace were designed by Louis Le Vau and André Le Notre. The gardens are made up of pools, monumental sculpture, and thoughtfully planned paths. The formal gardens at Versailles are carefully manicured, further emphasizing the wealth and power of the king.
What is a fete galante?
A fete galante is a type of Rococo painting that depicts aristocrats engaging in a small, elegant party, usually in a beautiful outdoor location, and often involving some kind of amorous, if not erotic activities. This type of painting was first introduced by Jean-Antoine Watteau in the early 18th century. And his work, A Pilgrimage to Cythera, 1717, is a good example. The mythical island of Cythera is the location of the birth of Aphrodite, who was formed by sea foam. To the far right, a statue of Aphrodite, also known as Venus, is decorated with flowers. Just below, a group of dreamy, well-dressed aristocrats hold hands and sit close, some embracing, in an apparent homage to the Greek goddess of love. Further to the left, a fairy, shaped like a scallop shell and draped with a pink cloth, waits to take the reluctant visitors off the island. Pink cherubs float overhead and the sky is tinged with the color of sunset. Watteau's painting reflects the Rococo style with its silky, powdery texture, amorous themes, and aristocratic focus. With A Pilgrimage to Cythera, Watteau created an entirely new category of painting, the fete galante.
What is a fresco?
A fresco is a wall painting made using the bone fresco technique of applying pigment to freshly mixed, wet plaster. The process results in durable, permanent images. Another technique, known as fresco secco, is a method of applying pigment to plaster that has already dried. This method results in more fragile images that can flake off over time. Fresco painting is usually done in areas with warm, dry weather, ideal conditions for the bone fresco process. Italian cities such as Florence and Siena are well known for their frescoes.
Who was Bicitra?
Bicitra was an important court painter active during the reign of Akbar the Great's son, Jahangir, who ruled from 1605 to 1627, as well as Shah Jahan, who built the Taj Mahal. Bicitra was a skilled miniature painter who was possibly raised by the court, which is where he got his early education. He was interested in European painting, and some of his work blends Indian landscapes with European perspective techniques. In his miniature painting, Jahangir preferring a Sufi to kings, c. 1625, Bicitra included a small self-portrait among a group of other portraits of important figures such as Ottoman rulers and even King James I of England, which Bicitra likely copied from another portrait. The self-portrait shows the artist holding a small painting of himself, resulting in a painting within a painting. Bicitra bows respectfully to Jahangir, the Mughal ruler.
Who is Mona Hatoum?
Mona Hatoum, 1952, is a Palestinian video and installation artist who was raised in Lebanon and works primarily in Britain. Hatoum's conceptual installations and performance pieces often communicate themes of exile and authority. Examples of her work include the minimalist Socle du Monde, Base of the World, 1992 to 1993. A large black cube that contrasts a metallic interior structure with a softer, more organic exterior embellishment.
What was the Russian realist movement?
As in France, 19th-century Russian artists were increasingly critical of the traditional approach to art promoted by the Academy of Arts. In a powerful show of protest, a large group of students, 13 in total, withdrew from the academy and formed a group later known as the Podvishniki, or the Wanderers. The Wanderers preferred art that was socially aware and promoted the values of the Russian working class and peasantry. Common themes in Russian realist art were peasant scenes, landscapes, and images of the Russian clergy. The group took their art on the road and traveled to towns and cities that would not normally attend the salons and galleries of St. Petersburg, creating uniquely accessible art. Artist members of the Wanderers included Ilya Repin, 1844 to 1930, Vasily Perov, 1834 to 1882, Nikolai Ge, 1831 to 1894, and Ivan Kramskoy, 1837 to 1887, among others.
What is Fragonard's The Swing?
Jean-Honoré Fragonard's, 1732–1806, erotic painting The Swing, 1756, is an example of a boudoir painting. So called because its intimate subject was meant for private viewing. Fragonard accepted the commission to paint The Swing, after another artist, Gabriel Frango-Estoyan, declined to take on the project. The painting depicts a lush, expansive garden scene. At its center is a young woman wearing a flowing pink frock. Her apparent lover, a man in a gray suit wearing a white powdered wig, reclines below her while a cleric pushes her on a swing. The lady is shown rising just above the aristocrat, giving him a salacious view under her dress, shocking nearby cherubs. Her delicate, pink shoe pops off her pointed toe, in apparent acquiescence. The painting is famous for its radiant colors and sensual themes, and is another good example of the Rococo style.
Who was Rachel Royce?
Rachel Royce, 1664–1750. Was one of three prominent women artists working in Netherlands in the 17th century. The others were Maria van Oosterwijk, known for her still lives, and Judith Leyster, who painted genre scenes and portraits. Rachel Royce specialized in flower still lives, which were enormously popular during the so-called Dutch Golden Age. One of Royce's still lives was even given as a gift to the visiting Queen of France, Marie de Medici. Flowers were popular subjects for still lives because of their metaphorical associations with the fragility and impermanence of life, lending these paintings moralizing meanings.
What happened to the Venus de Milo's arms?
In 1820, the remains of the Venus de Milo were accidentally discovered by a farmer on the Greek island of Melos, from which the sculpture gets its name. Since then, the Venus de Milo has become one of the most famous works of art in the world. Many other broken fragments of marble were found in the same field, and some of those pieces may have been fragments of her arms. These pieces suggest that the Venus de Milo might have been holding an apple in her right hand. But, there is another theory. Rather than an apple, she may have been admiring herself in the reflection of a polished shield. The second theory does the best to explain why the Venus de Milo's left leg is slightly bent and her body somewhat twisted. Unfortunately, the fragments found with the statue are now lost. But it doesn't end here. The lovely statue finds herself in yet another controversy.
Who are the young British artists?
The Young British Artists, YBAs, are a loosely affiliated group of contemporary artists working in London. Many of whom trained at London's Goldsmiths College in the late 1980s. Many of the young British artists gained the support of wealthy patrons, such as advertising magnate and art collector Charles Saatchi. The young British artists included Damien Hirst, 1965, who curated a show of YBA work at a warehouse in 1988, putting the group on the map. Other members, such as Gary Hume and Fiona Ray, exhibited in this early show. While others Rachel Whiteread, 1963, and Tracy Emin, c. 1963, did not, but are also considered YBAs. The work of these artists is very diverse. Gary Hume and Fiona Ray are primarily painters, while Whiteread and Emin are known for their conceptual sculpture and installations.
What is value?
Value is a property of color related to how light or dark the color appears. The higher the value, the lighter the color. For example, light blue pigment has a higher value than dark blue because more white has been mixed into it. Sharp contrasts of light and dark, known as chiaroscuro, can create drama as well as meaning in art. The artist Rembrandt is known for using this technique in his paintings. In The Night Watch, 1642, Rembrandt used chiaroscuro to create a spotlight effect that draws the viewer's attention to the elaborately costumed Captain Franz Banningcock and his yellow-clad companion. The other figures seem to recede into the background as Rembrandt used drab, lower value hues for the rest of piece.
What is brutalism?
The term brutalism was coined in 1954 and refers to a style of modern architecture developed by Le Corbusier, who promoted the use of rough concrete and favored heavy forms. Reinforced concrete can take on sculptural qualities, as in Le Corbusier's design for Notre Dame du Haut, 1950 to 1954, with its flowing roofline and round, asymmetrical tower. Brutalism was most popular during the 1960s and 1970s and coincided with the concept of art brut developed by artist Jean Dubuffet.
What are Siahi's 6 canons?
Siahi was a painter and scholar from the late 5th century, who is known for establishing 6 laws or canons of painting. These 6 canons go a long way in explaining the underlying philosophy of Chinese painting. There is ongoing debate as to the exact translation of each of the canons. But according to James Cahill, author of the 6 Laws and How to Read Them, They are as follows: engender a sense of movement through spirit consonance. Use the brush with the bone method. Responding to things, depict their forms. According to kind, describe appearances with color. Dividing and planning, positioning and arranging. Transmitting and conveying earlier models through copying and transcribing. See Kleiner 57. While difficult to understand, Siehi's principles of painting tell art historians a great deal about what was important to early Chinese painters. The first principle suggests a strong connection between art making and spirituality. The goal was to capture the spontaneity and intangible spirit quality of the subject being depicted. The latter principles are slightly more straightforward, and refer to technical skills. Siehi explains how to hold the paintbrush, encourages naturalism, and emphasizes skill development through copying and practice.
What is the picture plane?
For more information on perspective, Bruno Leschi, and the picture plane, please see The Early Modern World, c. 400-1300.
What is the Marode altarpiece?
The Marode altarpiece is an example of a triptych done by Flemish artist Robert Campen, also known as the Master of Flemely. Painted in oil, the large central feature depicts the Annunciation, a scene in which the angel Gabriel tells the Virgin Mary that she will be the mother of Christ. Gabriel's wings are brightly colored and Mary's drapery is deep red. She holds a Bible in her hands as if she has just been interrupted by the angel's arrival. As is common in northern painting, the Virgin Mary is shown in a bourgeois setting. The room looks like it belongs in an average 15th century, upper middle class home and is filled with everyday objects. On the smaller left panel, the work's patron appears, kneeling and watching the Annunciation through a door. On the right panel, Saint Joseph is shown in a workshop making mousetraps. The Marode altarpiece blends the International Gothic style's attention to detail with a sense of three-dimensional space. Each of the three panels has its own single-point perspective system. It is one of the most famous Renaissance works from the Netherlands.
What is abstract expressionism?
Abstract expressionism, which lasted from the 1940s to the 1960s, was an American movement influenced by European modernism, surrealism, and non-Western art traditions. Surrealist principles of psychic automatism were particularly influential, as was the influence of psychology and mythology. Abstract expressionist paintings tend to be very large and intense, and feature dynamic, bold colors. For many abstract expressionist artists, the creative process itself was as important as the work. Abstraction expressionist paintings do not represent a specific visible subject, but they do communicate emotions and other less tangible subjects. Artists labeled as abstract expressionists were diverse in their approach and styles. The movement can be divided into multiple categories and sub-styles. The most prominent being action painting and color field painting.
What is Murillo's Immaculate Conception?
Bartolomé Esteban Murillo, 1617–1682, was an important Spanish painter based in Seville whose art emphasized images of the Virgin Mary and the saints, and was painted according to rules set out by the leaders of the Catholic Counter-Reformation, which specified the manner in which the Virgin Mary could be depicted. Murillo painted multiple different paintings of the Immaculate Conception, including the Immaculate Conception of the Escorial, c. 1678, which conforms to these rules. The Immaculate Conception is a Catholic doctrine, not fully accepted as dogma until the 19th century, stating that the Virgin Mary was born without original sin. In Murillo's painting, Mary is clothed in blue and white and she appears suspended in a glowing heavenly space surrounded by cherubic angels. Her face looks upward, her hands are held in prayer, and her feet gingerly rest upon a delicate crescent moon. An image derived from Revelation 12:1, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, as quoted in Jansen 696. The delicate sweetness of Murillo's paintings influenced Spanish painters in the New World for nearly 200 years.
Who were the eight?
The Eight was a group of American realist artists with diverse styles: Robert Henry, 1865–1929, Arthur B. Davies, 1863–1928, William Glackens, 1870–1938, Ernest Lawson, 1873–1939, George Lux, 1867–1933. Maurice Prendergast, 1858–1924, Everett Shinn, 1876–1953, and John Sloan, 1871–1951, all of whom were rejected by the National Academy for a spring exhibition in 1907. In response, they had their own show at the Macbeth Gallery in New York City in 1908. Many of these artists went on to be known as members of the Ashcan School, a group who made gritty, realistic paintings of urban life. Their one and only show as The Eight received mixed reviews, with some critics feeling that the underbelly urban life was not appropriate subject matter for art. But it went on to make a major impact on American realism in the 20th century. Though some use the terms The Eight and Ashcan School interchangeably, they are not exactly the same.
What is Guanware?
Guanware is a type of imperial ceramic associated with the Song dynasty. Guanware vases were made of smooth stoneware and covered in a crackled white, and sometimes soft blue and green glaze, with round, bulbous bottoms, graceful stretched necks, and narrow lips. These sophisticated ceramics juxtapose meticulous craftsmanship with the unpredictability of the glazing process, in which the glaze cracks once the vessel is removed from the kiln and begins to cool.
What is Surrealism?
Like Dada, Surrealism was an early 20th century movement that made a major impact on art and literature between the First and Second World Wars. In 1924, French poet André Breton, 1896–1966, wrote the first Surrealist manifesto in which he called on writers to free themselves from the restrictions of rationality and explore creativity through subconscious means, including free association, dream analysis, and automatic writing and drawing. The word surreal suggests the merging of dreams with reality to reveal a superior, more inclusive reality. Breton credited Sigmund Freud with developing the foundations of surrealism in his studies in psychoanalysis. Key surrealist artists include Giorgio de Chirico, 1888–1978, Max Ernst, 1891–1976, André Masson, 1896–1987, Joan Miro, 1893–1983, Man Ray, 1890–1976. René Magritte, 1898–1967, and Salvador Dali, 1904–1989, among others. The work of the Surrealists is characterized by shocking, often erotic imagery, such as René Magritte's fusion of the nude female form with a face in his oil painting. L.E. Weil, 1934, and the juxtaposition of surprising, seemingly unconnected elements. For example, Merit Oppenheim covered a cup, saucer, and spoon with fur in her objet. L.E. Desgenais and Fourrure, in 1936. Like many other examples of surrealist art, these disorienting works were inspired by Freudian symbolism and dream analysis.
What is Islamic art?
This is particularly challenging question to answer. The religion of Islam began in the Middle East during the 7th century, and quickly spread east across Central Asia to parts of China and Southeast Asia, and west into large areas of North and Central Africa, and Europe. The term Islamic art does not necessarily indicate that the art is religious in subject matter, but refers to art produced by cultures that practice Islam. Islamic art is therefore incredibly diverse, and influenced by both religion and secular cultural values. Some of the most common types of Islamic art include carpets and tapestries, calligraphy, book decoration, metalwork, and architecture.
Why was Florence an important Renaissance city?
The Renaissance is said to have begun in Florence in the 15th century. A period known as the Quattrocentro. At this time, Florence was not just a city, but a city-state, much like the city-states of ancient Greece. 15th century Florence was also a republic with a constitution, though it was a far cry from a democracy. Florence was an economic powerhouse with a lot of civic pride. Money was pumped into civic projects such as cathedral building, architectural decoration, and artist competitions, all in an attempt to beautify the city and enjoy the pleasures of wealth. Florentine patrons supported the careers of important artists such as Masaccio, Donatello, and Ghiberti, whose innovative work kick-started the Renaissance.
What is Valdivian sculpture?
The Valdivian culture, c. 3550 to 1600 BCE, was based in southern Ecuador and was older than the first dynasties of Egypt. They are known for making clay figurines, which are some of the earliest representative art produced in the Americas. These figurines were usually quite small, and some pieces are hermaphroditic, displaying both male and female characteristics. Many of these sculptures have been found in domestic settings, which suggest an association with women and fertility.
What is Cufic?
Named after the town of Kufa in Iraq, Cufic is an early form of Arabic script that evolved from a style of inscription used for coins and stone monuments. The Cufic script features large letters as early Qur'ans were often shared by multiple readers, and are characterized by long horizontal lines and thick rounded curves. Cufic was the style of calligraphy used most often until the 12th century.
Who was Eva Hesse?
Eva Hesse, 1936 to 1970. Was a German-American painter and sculptor whose Jewish family dramatically escaped Nazi Germany. Her highly experimental art is usually categorized as minimalist, however. Unlike many minimalists, narrative and personal history are an important part of her work. Her installation sculpture Rope Piece, 1969 to 1970, a tangled, slightly frightening web of rope, string, and wire, has a different form each time it is moved to a new location. The piece has been described as a drawing in space. Her work Accession to, 1968 to 1969, now at the Detroit Institute of Art, is a cube made of vinyl and steel. The cube is open at the top, revealing a lush layer of fiber-like tubes, a reaction against the severity of much minimalist art.
What is installation art?
Installation art is art that is more than three-dimensional. It creates a complete environment. Entire gallery spaces can be devoted to a single installation, usually but not always temporarily. Installation art became popular in the 1970s and continues to be an important art form today. Installations rely upon the interactions of the viewer/participant and can even be collected, which means they are not necessarily site-specific. Yves Klein created one of the first installations with his work The Void in 1958. For this work, Klein presented a completely empty, white-walled gallery. Other famous examples of installation art include British sculptor Rachel Whitehead's Embankment 2005, which she created for the Turbine Hall at the Tate Modern Museum in London. The piece consisted of tower-like mountains made of thousands of white, plaster casts of boxes. Visitors to the gallery were able to move through the installation, allowing them to engage with the monumental art form on an intimate level.
What is style?
The style of a work of art is the distinctive way in which it has been formally arranged. Style can also refer to the way in which a work of art is characteristic of the work of a specific artist, and the time period, or the geographical location, in which it was created. For example, a painting by Vincent van Gogh can be instantly recognizable because of its distinctive style. Van Gogh is known for paintings that feature bold colors, thick application of paint, and noticeable brush strokes.
What is the portrait of Lord Packle?
Lord Packle was a powerful Mayan ruler from the ancient city of Palenque, in modern-day Chiapas in Mexico, between 615 and 683 C. Lord Packle and his descendants commissioned a great deal of monumental art and architecture in this Mayan capital. At his death, Lord Packle was laid to rest in a sarcophagus. In his tomb, archaeologists found a portrait of the ruler as a young man with a crown of jade and flowers. He is thought to be represented according to Mayan ideals of beauty, which emphasize a long, sloping face and skull, and full lips. Traces of red paint indicate that the piece used to be painted, as was most Mayan sculpture.
What makes the Mona Lisa such an enduring image, recognizable by millions of people around the world?
The Mona Lisa was painted by Leonardo da Vinci between 1503 and 1507. The painting itself, oil on panel, is quite small, 30 x 21 inches. It has been stolen and returned, appears to have had part of it cut away, and depicts a Florentine noblewoman against an enigmatic background. It is likely a portrait of a Florentine woman named Lisa Gherardini. Spend some time looking at the painting. At Lisa's cool expression as she stares out of the frame with her arms delicately crossed.
What are some examples of postmodern art?
Many postmodern art movements are described as neo-movements, because they respond to earlier modern styles or approaches. Here is a sampling. Neo-expressionism. Neo-expressionism is primarily focused on painting. Though 252 some sculpture is considered neo-expressionist, and first began in Germany in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Neo-expressionist paintings are usually vibrant, sometimes figurative, but often raw and self-aware. Neo-expressionist artists include Anselm Kiefer, 1945, from Germany, and the American Julian Schnabel, 1951, whose large, brash paintings have been highly financially successful. Neo-Geo. Neo-geometric conceptualism, or Neo-Geo, developed in New York City in the mid-1980s and is characterized by postmodern appropriation and a strong sense of irony. Artists associated with Neo-Geo include Peter Halley, 1953, and Ross Blecker, 1949, who brought new symbolic meaning to familiar modernist forms. Artists such as Ashley Bickerton, 1959, and Jeff Koons, 1955, are Neo-Geo artists more interested in consumer culture. And their art is sometimes also categorized as post-pop. Neopop. Neopop is another term for post-pop, an art movement that developed under the influence of pop art in the 1980s. Neopop artists include Haim Steinbach, 1944, Alan McCollum, 1949. Jeff Koons, 1955, Ashley Bickerton, 1959, and Takashi Murakami, 1961. Neopop artists frequently use pre-existing, everyday objects, also known as ready-mades, in their work and question the values of mainstream culture.